The energy sector remains paramount to Zambia achieving her economic aspirations. But of course, this sector has not been spared from challenges which have occasioned phenomena such as load shedding. Today, I'm excited and privileged to be joined by an energy expert in Miss Sarah Mutinta Muyuni. And of course, she will be unpacking Zambia's energy sector and helping us to understand the significance of power purchase agreements. Sarah, I'm glad that you're with us today. Okay. So as we do our shows on the People Space podcast, we've got a tradition where today is an exciting day for me. As you and I were talking before we actually, went on air. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with an energy expert who's a woman, and I know there's a whole lot of you out there, but I haven't had the privilege of interacting with one. So I'm very, very much excited today. So please don't mind my bubbliness. Um, we have a tradition where we first would like to understand a little bit about our guests, even as we get into the conversation. So, first and foremost, just help us understand what exactly inspired you to be able to build a career in the energy sector and what has motivated you throughout this journey.
Um, I will not give you a grand inspiration story. I'm an accountant by background. So when I finished my studies, I wanted to get a good job in an accounting firm or any other that would be well paying. And when I got my job at ZESCO, I was in my early 20s. So of course at that time, grand inspiration was not the thing. It was, yay, I have a good job. But as the years went by and my career in ZESCO evolved from accounting, going into business development and really entering the sphere of looking into the developments in the power sector, tariffs, PPA negotiations, and all that kind of thing, where I really got to see the energy sector in a broader way. It was then, it came to me that I can make a difference for my country. This is something that is of paramount importance to every Zambian citizen, and my work is thus of paramount importance to the continued development of my nation. And so that I would say has been my driving force over the years. Even now, as I am in consultancy, I still look at it in that manner. I do work for clients within the nation as well as within the region, because I think that even as a continent, we still have a long way to go when it comes to the self-reliance in the energy sector.
I know you've mentioned ZESCO, having passed through there in curving your career, but what were some of the major challenges that you encountered and how did you overcome those challenges in this space?
Well, as you mentioned, in this space, females are few and far between. So that was something to deal with. I must say that the male colleagues in the space are very encouraging. That's something that I really appreciated throughout my career. There was support at every instance, and I would say the most challenging thing in our energy sector is that the whole thing is a balancing act. Energy is a very emotive subject, and electricity in particular. And the general populace wants electricity, but they don't want to pay for it. So that's the problem. That is the biggest problem. They would rather, if they could get it for free, they would love to have it for free. And, hence whenever there's a tariff application or public hearings, you have all the submissions, and almost every single one will be talking about, no, we don't want the tariff increase. But at the same time, they'll be complaining about the quality of service delivery. And there is no connection being made between how much revenue is coming in and what that means for the utility's ability to deliver the service to the quality that you require, and also with the reliability that you require. So it's all connected, and the public needs to understand that. So that is one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge, of course, is it's connected to the first one, the need for the sector to attract more investment in order for it to expand and meet the demand for the populace and for, of course, the economy, businesses and the like. The challenge when it comes to that, of course, is the investor needs to know that they will actually earn a proper return from what they're doing. And the sector needs to grow to enhance the confidence of investors, to enhance the confidence of financiers, and also, to enable them to earn the return that they need. So it's that balance. We need to accept that we want quality. Quality costs something. And we need to also look at how can we make sure that the cost is not too high, but at the same time, it's sufficient for those that need to come in to be able to come in and do what's necessary for us to have the energy that we require.
Which is something very, very important. The general populace generally not being willing to pay cost-reflective, price for electricity. And the subject of, tariffs has always been a very interesting issue. I've attended some of the public hearings, and, the conversations sometimes are just, they're just funny, for lack of a better term. But do you think it's a mindset issue? If so, what can the utility be able to do to be able to make people understand the need for cost-reflective tariffs and in the long run, the correlation to stability of supply? At the same time, do you think that maybe the culture of subsidy has perpetuated this kind of, unrealistic expectation when it comes to business? Because it's not clearly realistic to be able to pay a certain fee and expect investors to come and supply 24/7. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, you have partially answered your own question as to why this is. When we gained our independence, those of us who remember a bit of our history, our economy was socialist in nature. So the government took up a lot of the responsibilities. It was the government taking care of its people. So the government was paying for free education. We had electricity. The government was paying most of that. We were paying, a pittance, really, for most of the services, be it electricity or water and other services. There was a lot of subsidization coming in from the government. Now, of course, that is not sustainable in the long run, unless you have a population which is really able to, pay very high levels of taxes, because the government doesn't make money. The money comes from taxation of the populace, and if the government is to continue taking up that, we'll be paying taxes that we couldn't possibly manage. So, as the nation has grown, the government was not able to keep up with that kind of thing. And hence the situation where you have aging infrastructure, whether in the water sector, the energy sector, and anything else that the government was carrying, and the need to bring in the private sector. Now, when you bring in the private sector, these are not Father Christmas. For them, it's about, I'm investing my money and I expect a return. If I cannot get it here, I'll go to the sector that will give me the return that I require. So in order for electricity or water or whatever services to attract the investors to those places, they need to be able to offer that investor sufficient return to abandon whatever else he may have invested in instead and come and invest in electricity. And that, of course, means there must be sufficient revenue coming in. Who's going to pay that? If the government has not been able to put up the subsidies sufficiently to maintain the infrastructure, it means the customer must pay. So these are some of the things that the public needs to be made to understand. It takes time. It takes constant communication. Unfortunately, we only tend to try and communicate this at the time when we're doing public hearings or that kind of thing. This is something that needs to be constantly communicated, because it's not only about electricity. It's about all the other services that we have. The water sector is struggling as well with the same kind of things of insufficient revenue for them to be able to carry out their services as well as they should. So, and unfortunately for them, water is not a dangerous product. So for them, the losses are very high. People are able to make holes in the pipes as they, almost at will. The thing that saves electricity is that it's dangerous to tamper with. So there is need for constant education, even from schools. People need to understand how the economy actually works and what you need in order to be able to have those services at the level of quality and reliability that you require.
Okay. Right now, we are currently sitting at 3 hours of supply. of electricity. And the general public with me would like to understand, is this really a ZESCO issue? Is this a ZESCO problem, or it's beyond ZESCO? Is this something? When are we likely to get out of this, really? Because we're tired. Sarah, we're tired.
We are all extremely tired with the situation. But no, it's not just a ZESCO issue. It's a sectoral issue, it's an economic issue. And when are we likely to get out is dependent on several things. How soon are we able to get ourselves alternatives to the hydro that we are so dependent on? Our generation mix, as almost everybody must be aware by now with all the statements that have been made, is 80% hydro. We've got about maybe 8% coal, and then 7 solar, 5 heavy fuel or diesel. So that is the way our mix is right now. And unfortunately for us, our rain patterns have been such that the 80% that we have has been seriously affected with the weather. And there's need for us to then branch out into alternatives. We are pushing renewables with, serious fervor now. There have been so many agreements signed by ZESCO with potential developers to develop, solar plants and a few wind here and there. And of course, there's I think 3 or so coal plants also that are in the works. So we are going to get out of it. It's not a political matter. It's just a time issue. It takes time for things to be built, for us to be able to get the energy out of them. So yes, we will come out of it. It may take maybe 3 or 4 years before we get to a point where we can confidently say, oh, now we will not get a power cut. In my opinion, that is me speaking, not anyone else. Because yes, we will get the solars and everything, but we need the base load to back them up for us to say, and that's the coal plants. Those take about 3-4 years to construct. Some of them have already started. One has already started. The others haven't even begun construction. So that's why I'm saying 3 years or so, we'll have the base load on board to support the solars that would have come on board. A lot of them will come on board in the next year or 2. We'll have a lot of solar coming on board. But then we need the base load as well for us to then be confident in our self-sufficiency. So yeah, that's what I would say. Maybe in a year we'll be okay, but still a bit shaky. And then, as the base load comes on board, we should then be in a stronger position. So that's my view. So yes, we are tired, but we need to endure in order for us to pass through and actually get to the other side of this. Yeah.
Talking about, branching out, there's been a song about diversifying Zambia's energy mix, moving away from reliance, as you highlighted, of hydropower to many alternatives and sources. Where are we currently? Are we making progress? Because, for me, when I hear the word diversification, sometimes I feel like it's just a very fancy term that politicians and everybody else uses. We need to diversify this. But when it comes to actually going on the ground to see the actual diversification, you see that where the mouth is and where the works are, there's a whole lot of a distance. It's like between here and Pluto. So where are we when it comes to diversifying the energy mix in this country?
Well, I think we're moving forward. Like I mentioned, there's so much that's going on in the renewable energy space. For us to bring in renewables, trying to head to the target that we've set for ourselves in various documents, be it the National Energy Policy or Energy Compact and all. So there's a lot of push in that direction. When it comes to baseload, like I said, there's some developments in coal. Of course, nobody likes to talk about that because, they say coal is polluting and all of that. But it's a resource that we have as a country. So let's utilize it. Other areas, there's wind. There's a couple of wind projects that will be coming on board. There has been talk about nuclear, but that's something that may or may not happen not in the short term, maybe medium, long term. But yeah, the diversification is taking place. And I think within the next year or so, people will be able to see the percentage of solar in our energy mix really increasing. And then, of course, as the other plants come on board, we will see changes in that regard as well. And let's not forget the interconnections that we have, because that enables us to also make use of energy sources from our neighboring countries. Okay. So the most exciting one, in my view, is the connection to the Eastern African Power Pool. We've been SAP members all along, but when we connect using the Zambia-Tanzania line, we would then connect to the Eastern African Power Pool, where we have Ethiopia with its huge resources, and Tanzania, which has excess power currently that they don't have anywhere to take, will then be able to export to ourselves. So there's exciting things ahead. Mm.
I'm glad that you mentioned something that I was thinking about. When you talked about, as we talk about alternative development of alternative sources of energy, the issue of coal. You'll find that sometimes, these countries that would sponsor, I won't say which ones, but they'll come and promote all kinds of, advocacy work and everything, towards clean energy and everything, yet their economies are powered by coal. I find that to be a little bit hypocritical though. Like,
Yeah, there's arguments to be made on both sides of that story. We know that as a planet, we need to keep ourselves sustainable going forward. There are goals out there when it comes to carbon emissions, and not increasing the global temperature by more than, is it 1 or 1.5 degrees in a year, in order to keep the Earth habitable for us humans. But we are aware that the bulk of the pollution, where the bulk of the pollution is coming from, and the promotion of renewable energy all over the world, not just here, is in an attempt to address the global situation. But at the same time, development cannot be ignored. Okay, we understand that our colleagues have been powered by coal all along, and they're trying to clean up their act now, which is well and good. But at the same time, it shouldn't hinder those that are still trying to get up there, like ourselves and other nations that do have some coal resources, from developing those as they counteract the effects thereof by continuing to develop renewable energy. So let's balance. It's all about balance. You can't go off in one direction or the other. Going full scale coal without doing anything about it would definitely lead to a doomed planet. At the same time, going full scale renewable, we have seen that there are consequences to that. Germany is an example. I'll mention them because it's public knowledge that, heading in a direction that is all renewables and nothing else may lead you to a point of realizing, oh, we actually do need baseload to back this up. And we may need to turn to things like nuclear and coal that we don't necessarily like, but we have to have in order for the system to be stable. So there is need for a balanced way of looking at these things. And I think the realization is there. I think a couple of years ago, it would have been extremely difficult for anyone to get any financing. It still is very difficult to get financing for coal. I think the financing for the projects that we do have is probably coming from the Eastern bloc that are still, looking at it in a more open-minded way. But yes, we do appreciate the efforts to maintain global planetary and environmental stability, but that must also be balanced with the manner in which development is done. So let's see if we can use those resources but counteract them, and also clean up the technology. In terms of coal, it has been cleaning up over time, such that the level of emissions that you get from a coal plant now are nothing compared to the way they used to be back in the day. I remember when I last visited Mamba, the people there were telling me about the time when they said they were bringing a coal plant. The people in Mamba were despairing. They thought now they were going to be holding up umbrellas, to catch ash when this plant begins operating. And they were assured, no, we have a proper project, and when you go to Mamba, you breathe clean air. This. You can't even tell there's a coal plant in the area until you see it. Yeah. So there have been serious improvements in technology when it comes to coal. And I think that is something that will assist us going forward as well.
Okay. So before we take a break, let's discuss some of the reforms that we've seen take place within the energy sector. And we are talking, introduction of the multi-year tariff framework and open access regulations. How will these In fact, will these improve power generation? And if so, how? Because obviously, all these reforms, at, at the center of all these reforms, the question that ordinary Zambia has is, will it improve power generations?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, they are targeted at helping the power sector to improve and expand. When it comes to the multi-year tariff framework, this is just basically giving us a pathway toward achieving cost reflective, achieving and sustaining. Let's not forget and sustaining, achieving and sustaining cost reflective tariffs without shocking the economy with sudden movements in the tariff. So the regime allows customers to know the general direction tariffs are going for the next 5 years. Okay, so that allows them to plan as they are doing their businesses, and it also gives the people that wish to invest in the electricity sector a view of how much they could possibly earn, because they can see what the tariffs are going to be in the next 5 years. So that is the purpose of the multi-year tariff framework. So the utility has a path towards cost reflectivity or its sustenance. Once it's achieved, businesses get to plan. They know which direction the tariff is going. Investors see what sort of revenues they can earn in the sector. And that assists them in making the decisions that they need to make to come into the sector and invest. When it comes to things like open access, this just opens it up for more participants or players to come to the table. When you have open access, our transmission lines have now become like an open highway where several parties can trade. So as a customer, at some point, if you wish to, not buy power from ZESCO, but you want to buy from maybe Mozambique, let's say, you can actually do that and just be buying power from Mozambique and paying for wheeling on the ZESCO network to bring that power to yourself, and perhaps paying a fee also for backup if there's a problem with your Mozambican supplier. Same thing for those who are setting up generation plants. If they want to sell directly to a single client instead of selling it to ZESCO, they can have the PPA with that client, pay ZESCO for wheeling, and that player is then able to set up, because there's a customer who is willing to pay prices which may be above what ZESCO would be willing to pay, because they want stability of supply. So they are willing to pay this plant to give them power at a higher cost. So that helps the sector to grow. You get new generators coming on board, and they supply these particular client. And as time goes on, when they've paid off their financing, they're able to drop their tariffs maybe and sell to ZESCO as well. So those are the advantages of these initiatives.
You are watching the People Space podcast with me, Wenson Mavor. And of course, today we are discussing the energy sector, getting into understanding the importance of power purchase agreements, and of course, just generally interrogating the issue of diversification within the sector. But at the same time, trying to answer the $1 million question, which is, when are we likely to get out of this challenge which we are in, which is the load shedding? And of course, to provide some perspectives is the energy expert, Miss Sarah Mutinta Muyuni. And of course, she is helping us just to understand what is really happening in the sector and when we're likely to get out of this doldrum, if I might call them, where we are. But again, before we get on a break, I'd like to post a reminder to each and every one of you. First and foremost, thank you very much for following the People Space podcast. But remember, we don't just come here to provide you with quality conversations. We also provide an opportunity for you to win yourself some amazing and fantastic prizes, which range from t-shirts, mug cups, capes, puffer jackets, hoodies, you name it. We all have quality top of the range products that you can win yourselves. But all you simply have to do to be among those lucky winners is be interactive on our platforms where the People Space podcast does broadcast. We are talking Facebook, YouTube, under the handle the Center for Trade Policy and Development, and CTPD Zambia on platforms like X, formerly Twitter, TikTok and Instagram. And if your comment garners enough traction or reactions or comments, you might just be that lucky winner. Beyond that, we do also offer an opportunity for you to be able to meet some of our guests and experts, just to have a one-on-one interaction with them and be able to learn firsthand from them. So let's get interactive. See you shortly.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Wamonk, Navamoma, wherever you're watching me from, countrymen, countrywomen. My name is Jemima Mwava, and I'm also known as the female commander. I am the Unzasu Vice President-elect, and I am here to represent every student voice. So it's your voice, my command, and our change. Otherwise, catch me on the People's Space podcast. Tune in and don't forget to comment, like, and share.
Welcome back to People's Space Podcast. Today we are discussing the energy sector, and my guest is Ms. Sarah Mutinta Muyuni. She is an energy expert, and she's helping unpack Zambia's energy sector, providing some perspectives on the power purchase agreements, and of course, answering the million-dollar question about the load shedding that we're currently experiencing. And I know that, like me, most of you are asking, when is this thing likely to come to an end? And of course, those are some of the answers that she is providing today. And I'd like to again just remind you, you can stand a chance to win yourself some amazing prizes. Let's just get interactive on the People's Space podcast, the platforms where we broadcast our episodes, which is Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and of course, LinkedIn and other platforms. All you simply have to do is be interactive on those platforms. If your comment garners enough traction or reactions, you might just be that lucky winner that will walk away with some of the fantastic and amazing prizes. And if you think this is just a clickbait, I will advise you to check on the Facebook platform under the handle, the Center for Trade Policy and Development, and look out for some winners there that will be receiving some of the fantastic prizes. Sarah, continuing from where we left off, one of the things that I think I'd like to get off my mind, first of all, is I remember attending some meetings at the Energy Regulation Board, and one of the things that was coming out strong as we were looking at addressing the challenges affecting the country's energy sector was ZESCO addressing what people were terming some management inefficiencies. You have been in the power sector. What are the biggest challenges that ZESCO currently faces, and how can these management inefficiencies be addressed?
Well, it would be difficult for me to state what to do to address them if I don't know what they are. Generally, people have I think always expressed dissatisfaction with service delivery in most of our public utilities. And it is something that is constantly being addressed. The Energy Regulation Board, for instance, has put up what they call key performance indicators. These are meant to enable the utility to improve its level of service delivery to its customers. These cover things like how long a customer is allowed to be out of supply, how long, how much, or what level of losses the company should be able to have on its network. That speaks to how well the network is maintained in order for those losses to be reduced. They speak to its level of staffing, because I think that's one of the issues that you hear people, no, there are too many people at ZESCO. The KPIs address that. They look at the efficient number of people that are required to run that institution. You will have a bad apple no matter what you do. But anyway, so the key performance indicators are there to address some of these things. Not only do they have key performance indicators with the regulator, they are now also key performance indicators with the IDC, which is the institution that was set up to manage all parastatals. So all of those things push the utility towards certain levels of efficiency, in which it would be benchmarked with some of the best in the world in the OECD countries and so on. So people can rest assured that their cry is heard, and as much as possible is being done in order to ensure that the utility makes it to a certain level of efficiency. People must also understand that certain efficiencies could also have a knock-on effect on other things which they may not like. Like, for instance, they could go full hog automation. That would mean numbers could drastically drop in terms of people that have jobs in ZESCO. You know, there are technologies out there that could be used. you drop the numbers, you then complain that there aren't enough jobs in the economy. So there are all those things that need to be considered. But rest assured, there is a continuous push towards efficiency within the utility itself, from the regulation board, as well as from the owners now, the IDC. So you know, things like response times, some of the complaints are what gave rise to the birth of the customer service center, where everyone is able to call in to do their complaints, which is now centralized, and then the jobs are distributed out. What perhaps needs work is the feedback loop. I think you know, anyone will be able to tell you that they called the customer service center, made a complaint. Some will get feedback, but not everyone. And also the knowledge with where the technical team is with regard to any assignment is something that may need to be worked on, so that the people at customer service are being shouted at less. They have more information to give. So yeah, there are efficiencies that need to be addressed, and there are ways in which that is being done.
So the 2025 National Energy Compact sets ambitious targets for 10,000 megawatts by 2030. What does this signal, you know, about Zambia's energy ambitions and transition priorities?
Well, these goals tell us where we want to go as a nation, and what it is that we want to achieve. The goal of having 10,000 megawatts installed is backed up by what we want the nation to be doing by then. There are goals in there regarding what we need to do in terms of agriculture. There are goals in there with what we need to do in terms of mining. There's the famous 3 million tons target, you know, and of course, there are projections with regard to our population growth and so on. And so in order for us to be able to feed ourselves in inverted commas with enough energy, we need that level of growth as a nation. And of course, that signals to investors out there that would like to invest in our power sector that we are open to this particular level of investment. And it then, you know, puts it upon us to show seriousness in terms of wanting to achieve that target by ensuring that all the aspects that investors are looking at, pricing, institutional strength, proper contracts, strong legal facilities are there for them to be able to know that, yes, Zambia wants to do 10,000. These aspects are in place. We can then go into that market and develop. Yeah.
So for those that, for the benefit of those that are unfamiliar, what are power purchase agreements and how important are they when it comes to Zambia's energy sector? Because we hear a lot about the power purchase agreements. In fact, even in those public hearing meetings, at some point, they will be mentioned somewhere.
Yes. A power purchase agreement is, as its name suggests, it's an agreement between two parties, one that is selling power, one that is buying power. This agreement will manage the relationship of those two parties during the course of their interaction. And this agreement covers things from where is this power going to be delivered, the delivery point, how will it be measured. It covers metering. It covers the price at which this power will be sold, what happens when there's a fault, who takes the risk when there's a problem, what happens when there's a problem on either side, how they inform each other of said problem, how they resolve disputes between themselves. You know, it covers the whole range of the relationship. But of course, when people talk about power purchase agreement, the whole thing is just collapsed into the price. Nobody thinks about any of the other surrounding things. But essentially, the agreement is meant to ensure that there's proper risk allocation between the parties. The commercial arrangements between them are known, and you know, what constitutes default and termination is also clearly spelled out. Yeah.
Okay. So we've also noted that in the past, ZESCO's arrears were partly attributed to independent power producers. You know, how did this happen, and what lesson can we draw, you know, from this going forward?
Yeah, this is a very nice question. I like it because a lot of assumptions are made about those agreements and how quote unquote bad they were. But let's start with the beginning of it. People formed career. Anyway, The background to this is that in 2005, we had a 2004-5, we had a cost of service study that was done, okay, by the Energy Regulation Board. Consultants were hired, and this cost of service study, as you know, a cost of service study seeks to establish how much does it cost to produce electricity in a particular country. And out of that also came mechanisms by which ZESCO could now make its tariff applications. And the first attempt at a multi-year tariff mechanism, though it was not legislated at the time, but the tools that were being used would be able to project this is how the tariff is supposed to move for the next such and such years in order for the utility to be sustainable. So that study was published, of course, and as intended, those results attracted investors into our electricity sector on the basis that this is the trajectory these tariffs are taking, and so when we go into this market, we'll be able to charge prices that will enable us to earn a return on our investment and supply this power to the state utility. And by the way, I forgot to mention as I was talking about power purchase agreements. These agreements, when it comes to situations where it is a generator selling power to the grid and wants to develop their plant, the agreements are made. There's not a single block on the ground. Okay. These agreements are made based on the information that both parties have about their supply requirement on the part of the buyer and the cost of the plant, how much it is going to cost to develop this thing, and how long it is expected to run, its lifespan, and therefore how much you need to charge in order to pay for the cost of said plant, and whoever it is, pay the loans that have been borrowed in order to build said plant. Okay? No block has been put there. We are just making an agreement. This is how much it will cost to build my plant, and so this is how much I'm charging. Are you willing to pay for that? Yes. Fine. And the person saying yes is saying it based on, oh, I know that my prices at that time will be sufficient for me to buy from this guy. Okay? So agreements were made on that basis with the plants that came in on board. I believe it's in the public sphere, so I can mention Mamba and other plants. And the plants were built, okay, and began to run. Now, what then happens is that the tariff path that was there at the time did not materialize, okay? The tariffs did not move in the manner in which it was thought they would move. They were slower. By the time the plants were coming on board, the tariffs were far lower than they should have been. And those plants now were running, the agreements were in place, and the prices had been agreed and needed to be paid. And what then happens? Of course, there'll be debt. Because if you're selling at 7 and you're buying at 10, you have a 3 that you are not able to pay for every single unit that is coming from that plant. You understand? So it doesn't matter, you know, what you do. There's going to be a buildup of amounts that you are owing this supplier unless your prices rise or you find a way to renegotiate and reduce the tariff to stem the bleeding in terms of the contracts. So I hope I have explained it as plainly as I can, how that came to be. So, you know, they have been, you know, no, people didn't know what they were doing. They did know what they were doing. It's just that what was assumed at the time did not pan out in the manner that it was expected to. And I don't think you can blame someone for the information they had at the time that they were making the agreements when that doesn't pan out in the way it is supposed to. So that was how ZESCO ended up where ZESCO ended up. And we ended up with situations where we had to go into renegotiation with those plants because they also are interested in the plant continuing to run. They don't want it to close down, much as they understand that ZESCO is not able to pay them that which they require. We have to figure out some way of dealing with this, along with the lenders and everybody else, to ensure that at least the plants continue to run and we find a way to restructure that debt and pay it off over maybe a longer period of time than it should have been. So that's the way we ended up where we ended up.
Okay. Let me take you to West Africa, where we look at Ghana's experience which revealed how undisclosed power purchase agreements led to costly take-or-pay liabilities. And drawing from this example, why is transparency key when it comes to power purchase agreements, and what fiscal or governance risks emerge when these contracts remain a secret? And I know that this has also been an issue, where in those public discussion meetings where people say these agreements are secretive, they don't even want us to know. They know that what they are doing is wrong. I've heard people passionately speak like that, and I'm just like, okay.
We've heard those sentiments. And maybe the question that we need to ask is, secret to who? Secret to who? Because for a power purchase agreement to be signed, there are certain parties that are fully aware of what is in those agreements. And before I go to Ghana, I will look at the Zambian situation. The public utility, which is what the public would probably be most concerned about when they're talking about transparency, for them to sign a power purchase agreement, that power purchase agreement has to go through approval by the Energy Regulation Board. It also has to go through approval by the Attorney General's office. So it's not a secret. You've got institutions that you as the public have mandated to make sure that that PPA is fair, has been fairly agreed within by the two parties, has terms that make sense. Okay? So you've given the mandate to the Energy Regulation Board to do that on your behalf as the public. You also trust your Attorney General to be able to look at the legal terms in that power purchase agreements and be satisfied that there are things that as the government, they can be agreeable to. Okay. Now, the Attorney General's approval has not always been there. It's there now. There was a time when it was only the Energy Regulation Board, and then later on, the Attorney General's office as well was introduced to actually do a thorough review and approval of the PPAs. So what I can say is that what is important for the public to know and to insist upon is proper institutional oversight. The PPAs cannot be put somewhere for the general public to read through. One, getting proper feedback is impractical because the people do not understand, will not be able to understand everything that is written there. So all you have is chaos and delay. So you have people that you have appointed into these institutions that are professional and that are able to understand the terms that are there and are able to have genuine oversight over them. The importance is to ensure that those institutions are strong enough, have the right people in them to do the job properly and to hold those people accountable as the public. Because as the public, quite frankly, if you get information about a PPA, it will be after it has already been signed. As you are aware, at the moment, I think you can get information on the size in terms of the capacity of the PPA, who has signed it with whom. That information is in the public domain. You will not get information regarding the price on each one. Okay, prices are negotiated between the two parties, but the Energy Regulation Board has oversight to ensure that this price makes sense. Okay, so when we say secretive, yes, it may not be out there for everybody to look at, but there are institutions that are entrusted by the public to ensure that these are correct. The Ghana scenario, at the time, I believe there were power purchase agreements that were entered into by two different entities. The government was also entering into agreements with emergency power producers. And I believe it was a kind of knee-jerk reaction to a crisis at the time, similar to the crisis that we have now, where you're trying to throw everything at getting power on board as soon as possible. For different reasons. Of course, if you are on the political side, you want these things to be done before the next election because you want to be able to show that you've done something. And of course, the utilities, people are complaining. You want to make sure that they have the power that they need. And unfortunately, institutional strength is what may have been missing. Their procurement was done in a manner that is likely to lead to problems. If you are in a situation where you have procurement that is being done by unsolicited bids, where people just come and say, oh, I can come and invest. There's no competition. You just, bring. People are bringing different projects probably at different prices. You haven't had a bidding process for people to compete against each other and possibly get the best price out of it. So those were some of the failings in that situation. Was the manner in which the plants were procured. People complain about the take or pay clauses that were in those power purchase agreements. It is normal for an agreement to have a take or pay clause because this is an agreement that must ensure to the investor and their lenders that they are going to get their money back. And it is normal for them to say, you are contracting 100 megawatts. We expect you to pay for 100 megawatts every month or year and so on. So we are sure that the revenue that we have projected is going to come through and we are going to be able to make the returns that we need, or our loan is going to be paid back. It is normal. What is expected of the buyer is to be sure when they say they want 100 megawatts that they want 100 megawatts. If you don't coordinate yourself or plan for yourself as a buyer as to what your actual supply requirement is, then you will end up in the Ghana situation where you over-contract and you are now stuck with contracts for which you have to pay, and you can't even take up the power that those contracts have in them. Okay, so that is the mismatch that was there and led to the problem that was in that particular country. I'm sure there are other nuances that could probably be heard from the Ghanaians themselves, but those are just a few things that one can learn from and pick up. So it's important for the parties to be very clear what is needed and what can be provided, and then you have the clauses that are necessary to protect the investor and ensure that they're able to come in confidently with their investment.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up our conversation, Sarah. But if you had to prioritize one reform that would make the biggest impact on Zambia's energy sector, looking at the crisis that we're in right now, what would it be and why specifically?
I think I would focus more on institutional independence and strength. That would be my focus, because the sector is getting more and more complex as more players are coming on board and different kinds of transactions are becoming possible. So it's very important that there is sufficient capacity with the institutions that we have entrusted to do the regulation of these, or rather of the sector, the electricity sector as a whole. So building capacity, making sure the legislation gives those institutions the necessary teeth and power to be able to do what they need to do. If possible, detach them financially from central government, so that they're able to run freely. And when you do that, the private sector will be far more comfortable and you get more confidence on their part. And the public also will have more trust, because there's always that thought in the back of people's minds that there's some manipulation of these institutions by the executive. So it's important to create that distance between regulators and the executive to improve the public trust. So I would focus on that area. If we're talking about energy in general and not just electricity, then my passion for the environment would come into play. That's where my focus would be, because I think as Zambians, we need to get very serious about that. We are not serious about our environment. And when it comes to energy specifically, I would probably say let's, as a country, accept the fact that the bulk of our population uses fossil fuels. Let's accept that and actually address that, as opposed to simply complaining about it. Let's do more investment in the sustainability of our forest resources. Let's get the public themselves involved in the sustainability, in the replenishment and sustainability of our forests from the village. And so the trees are being cut down. Let's ensure they're replanted. We know that it's going to happen. So let's just make sure that we sustain our forests, and also, our general environmental cleanliness and well-being. We have, I call it a mental problem as Zambians when it comes to the management of solid waste, because we just don't seem to be able to get a handle on that.
Thank you very much for coming through, Sarah. But definitely, I have to make mention that we will call you again.
No problem. We are available.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us on the People Space podcast. And my guest today has been Sarah Mutinta Muyuni. And of course, we've been talking about the energy sector and looking at the per purchase agreements. How important are they? You know, the issues of transparency surrounding these agreements, you know, trying to understand the technicalities as well. But at the same time, asking the biggest question, you know, that all of us have right now, which is, you know, this crisis that we're in as a country, is there a solution? If so, when are we realistically going to overcome this particular crisis? And thankfully, we've heard from Sarah just what is needed and when possibly we can get out of this particular crisis. And before I let you go, I would like to remind you that you do stand a chance to win yourself some amazing and fantastic prizes right here on the People Space podcast. All you simply have to do is be interactive on the platforms where we broadcast the episodes. That is Facebook, YouTube, under the handle the Center for Trade Policy and Development, and CTPD Zambia, on platforms such as LinkedIn, platforms such as, you know, Twitter, which is now X, and also you're looking at platforms such as, you know, Instagram and others on social media. If your comment on these platforms garners enough traction, you might just be that lucky winner of these amazing and fantastic prizes that range from hoodies, t-shirts, mug cups, puffer jackets, and other exciting memorabilia. And if you so wish, we can accord you an opportunity to be able to meet and interface with some of our guests and be able to learn from them in some of the areas that may be beyond the conversations that we have on camera. So take advantage of this exciting and amazing opportunity. From me, Wenson Mavoro, and my guest, see you next time.